As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, all my professional colleagues, friend of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, our students, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all on this beautiful Thursday, the 17th day of the month of November, year 2022. And I want to acknowledge all our viewers who are globally connected, listening to this program every Tuesday and Thursday. I can say specifically that I have more people connecting all the way from Mumbai in India, where the World Accountant Congress of Accountants is currently going on. But we'll talk about more of that as highlight of events there unfold. But today, I've come with a topic that is very germane and also with a special guest. The topic is about energy transition and the role of gas in Nigeria. Energy transition and the role of gas in Nigeria. And my guest for today is no other person than Mr. Olumide Esan, FCA. Mr. Olumide Esan, FCA. He is a partner of Deloitte West Africa and leads the energy and resources of business. He has over 21 years experience in tax, financial advisory, business advisory services. He trained with Attorney and KPMG professional services before he ventured into oil and gas industry, which he joined in Conoco Phillips. He's very versatile advisor with over 21 years, broad experience, industry experience, from handling complex and multi-jurisdiction exploration and production project. He has significant experience in internal control, tax audit, tax advisory structure, finance, financial accounting, and contract review, as well as participating in numerous financial due diligence assignments. His key area of interest and expertise include domestic and international physical rule petroleum contract negotiation, physical negotiation, and oil and gas value chain business advisory. He was the tax assurance manager for Shell in Nigeria. He was formerly the international tax manager for Shell in London with responsibility for countries in sub-Saharan Africa, that is the East, West, and Southern Africa. He is a fellow of both Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria and Noble Institute and Association of Chartered Certified Accountant, ACCA. Also a member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. He is an holder of a bachelor's degree in accounting from the prestigious Obafemi Awolowo University and MBA from Warwick Business School in United Kingdom. He is married and blessed with children. I can tell you that my guest today is someone that is vast, well equipped with oil and gas sector, and definitely we will do justice to the topic energy transition and the role of gas in Nigeria. But like I will always tell you that doing the commercials on this platform is the best thing that you can always do for yourself by promoting your goods and services. And let me quickly go on a very short commercial. When I come back, I'll be coming in with our guest as we do justice to today's topic. Please stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back, and I'm in with my guest for today, Mr. Olumide Esan, FCA. Good evening, sir. Our pleasure to have you on ICAN on air this evening.
Good evening, Mr. Kwade. It's my pleasure to be here this evening. This is my institute, so I'm proudly one of you. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to share today.
Proud to be associated with your institute and also to impact our members with some of the knowledge that you are acquainted with. I will be doing justice to energy transition and the role of gas in Nigeria. Let me start this way, Mr. Eson. Energy transition suggests moving from one energy source to another. In order to give our global viewers context to the topic, can you please run through the concept of energy?
Thank you. Someone rightly described energy as life. Okay, so energy is life. From the sunshine that the energy we get from that to what we need domestically to keep ourselves warm. It's all about energy. Life is about energy. So when we talk about energy transition, like you rightly said, it's about transiting from one form of energy to another, because we have discovered scientifically that the current source of energy are likely to lead to cataclysmic events if not arrested. And that is why the United Nations in its Charter 4.2 has made commitments to ensure that we do not exceed 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial level of climate temperature by year 2030, and furthermore ensure that by 2050 the world is carbon neutral. I believe that in the course of this chat this evening, we'll be able to, I will be opportune to expatiate more on carbon neutrality and the rest of the. But in summary, we've experienced significant flood in Nigeria this year. A third of Pakistan was underwater a couple of weeks ago.
Hmm.
Um, North America has experienced some very difficult storm and hurricanes. Everyone is feeling the impact of deterioration in climate, and we all know scientifically this has been adduced to the impact of greenhouse gas emission.
Hmm. Beautiful.
So we can unpack this as we go along this evening.
Definitely, we will unpack it and give more insight, even to the topic. Let me proceed in this discussion of energy transition. A lot needs to be understood, especially by laymen like myself and my audience that are here. So, what exactly, after defining energy, what do we call energy transition? And please run us through some of the reasons that could necessitate a transition from one energy source to another.
Okay, thank you. So right now, the world source significant form of energy from what we call the fossil fuel, and the fossil includes coals, um, crude oil, and to a large extent, natural gas. And it has been established that the carbon dioxide um, content and also the methane content of this source of energy is the main reason why the world is now in an emergency. And hence, there is need to move from this source of energy into what has been classified as the more sustainable forms of energy. And this comprise of renewables, such as solar, such as hydro, such as wind, and also natural gas. I think luckily the world, including European Parliament, has agreed that for now, nuclear power and natural gas will be classified as sustainable sources of energy. The use of the word sustainable, it's important because they believe that we can sustain the world using this source of energy, whereas we can't sustain the world if we continue using largely fossil to run our energy. There are a lot of countries around the world who still significantly depend on coal. Coal is about the worst polluter. But there are a lot more countries as well that are using, crude oil based sources for energy, and that's also is determined as a polluter. However, there are ways even to manage this, particularly the pollution from crude oil as source of energy, one of which is the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. In other words, we can literally capture the CO2 that is coming out of this source of energy somewhere in the ground and utilize it for something else. So it is essentially a call to move away from what is so much called dirty fuel into cleaner source of energy, which essentially we're looking at ultimately renewables, but also gas, because gas pollutes far less than oil.
That is a very wonderful submission, explaining to us energy transition, moving from the dirty fuel to that of the greener one. We have heard about Nigeria energy transition plan. What is it all about, and what it is the relationship with the Nigerian Gas Master Plan?
Thank you. As you are aware, the COP27 is currently ongoing in Egypt,
Yeah.
and it's all about the climate all over again. Um, so when we talk about energy transition, because it's really a very big statement and there's a lot of subtopics under it, there are countries like Nigeria who strongly believe that when we talk about energy transition, what we are talking about is uh, an energy evolution and not a revolution, as some countries will make us think that we can stampede and get it done, over a number of years. Whereas Nigeria and other countries in sub-Saharan Africa are championing what we call a just energy transition. And the use of the word just, it's important because it helps explain that in transiting from one form of energy to another, it is important to consider the socio-economic impact of that transition on human beings at different locations. For Nigeria, for example, Nigeria has only 45% of our citizens have access to electricity. So we can't even be talking about transition if the word just is not there. At least let's even first have access to energy, and then we can have a conversation around what source of energy we should use. And that is
Mm,
why when Nigeria launched its energy transition plan in the office of the vice president, it's key that we said that in line with the Sustainable Development Goal Agenda number 7, we want to ensure that all Nigerians have access to electricity by year 2030. I mean, Nigeria has gone further to say that by year 2030, we even want 30% of that electricity to be generated from renewables.
mm,
Nigeria has made what is called nationally determined contribution. So you see a lot of negotiations ongoing right now in Egypt. The world trying to come together and agree on how do we get to ensure that we reduce emission by 45% of what it was in 2010 if we are going to get to the pre-industrial level. So Nigeria has made, its nationally determined contribution public June this year, although the decision was made in 2021. And Nigeria is saying we're making a commitment that we will reduce our greenhouse gas emission unconditionally by 20% by year 2030.
mm,
However, if we will get funding help and technological support, we can reduce it by as high as 47%. So Nigeria has said 20% unconditionally, 47% conditionally. In addition, the president has approved the plan to ensure that Nigeria is carbon neutral by year 2050. So the whole energy transition plan for Nigeria centers around first, we want to ensure that people have access to safe power in Nigeria. And then we can also ensure that in doing that, significant amount of that energy is renewable and
mm.
is sustainable. So that is the
Wonderful.
drive. And so Nigeria wants to ensure that, by 2030 or ultimately by 2060, we have replaced all the firewood fired stoves in our different homes and kerosene
Mm,
fired stoves with LPG. And also to ensure that we use more of compressed natural gas in the years to come to ensure that
mm.
we're limiting the pollution and greenhouse gas from Nigeria.
A wonderful plan by our government. The implementation and actualization of it is what we all look out for. But everything seems to be centered around 2030, and it's just right behind the corner. Our guests, our viewers at home, you can always send in your question. Our guest is on board to make sure that we do justice to this. But before I take Mr. Shurunke question. You mentioned something relating to gas. That is a safer way of doing it, and I can clearly state that gas is one of the major source of energy. And Nigeria, we have the huge reserve of this natural gas. But before discussing gas in detail, can you educate us more? Other energy, other sources of energy, and give your objective assessment on the performance of these other sources of energy in Nigeria. Then we come back to gas.
Okay, so Nigeria is largely, we have installed grid capacity of almost 12 gigawatts, out of which 2.5 gigawatts is locked out. It's almost, non-utilized. But then if you look at our current generation, it's just under 4,000 megawatts.
4,000.
The bulk of that is actually thermal. We do have from, of course, Shiroro Dam and all that, but the bulk of it is thermal. Nigeria largely is relying on gas, on thermal plants, whether it's single phase or combined cycle for purpose of power generation. But for all the alternatives we have are wind and solar, but also hydro. But as of now, the renewable source of energy are still naturally a lot more expensive than the traditional fossil sources of energy. However, with improving technology, we are seeing significant changes. For example, the cost of PVC for solar has dropped 70% in the last decade. And also over the last 10 years as well, the cost of wind turbines and as a source of energy has dropped by 66 two-thirds. I think this gives a lot of people hope that because there is massive research going on, a lot of funding by governments around the world, that the prices of renewables will continue to fall to the point where it may become almost at par with the cost of fossil generated energy. Now,
That is an encouragement. But proceed.
you mentioned the Nigerian gas master plan. So, Nigeria last year has declared this decade the decade of gas. There have been a lot of government policies and shaking one another in respect to gas. We have the national gas policy, we have the national gas master plan. But what we are seeing is an increased focus even by the Nigerian government, recognizing the fact that Nigeria is more of a gas province than oil, basically. Nigeria has what people have described as accidental proven reserves of about 206 trillion cubic feet. And the use of the word accidental is, I might explain that. It's just the fact that when people came in, when investors came, what they were exploring for was oil. So in the process of exploring for oil, they found oil and gas. And so of our current reserve of 206 proven reserves, about 50% of it is associated gas, which comes with oil, and maybe another 50% non-associated gas. Now, we're saying that if our investors in this country, in this sector, will deliberately go out to explore for gas, that could be as much as 600 TCF of unproven gas in Nigeria, which means that with our gas resources, we can power the entire continent of Africa for decades to come. So Nigeria is truly rich in gas. And so in addition to the national gas policy, the NGMP, there are other programs that government has put in place to encourage the development of gas. One of which, for example, that Nigeria is still one of the highest when it comes to routine gas flaring as part of oil and gas exploration. But having said that, Nigeria has made significant progress in the last decade. The collaboration of the government and the oil companies to reduce the amount of flaring. But even to go a step further, government started a program that is called Natural Gas Monetization Program, which was intended for people to be able to offtake gas, which we ordinarily have been flared by the oil producers. So government is trying to encourage that program in the upstream, that instead of you flaring the gas, if you don't have need for it, let someone else who has a need for it harvest that gas and use it for something else. And at the same time, through the National Gas Expansion Program, the federal government introduced through the CBN a 250 billion investment fund for midstream, for people to be able to, invest in compressed natural gas and other, midstream and downstream utilization of gas resources. This is complemented by a host of other incentives in the tax laws. As a matter of fact, when the PIA was passed, in addition to an existing incentive for 5-year tax holiday that government has under CETA for investment in gas utilization project, or which gas pipeline falls into. Government under the PIA in section 302 has added an additional 5 years. All these are being done just to encourage investment into the gas subsector across the value chain. Government is trying to get people to bring money in and develop all sorts of ideas, including domestic LNG in Nigeria.
Thank you very much for that enlightenment to our viewers on the volume and the potential of the Nigerian gas endowment. Is indeed deep, and exposing us to some of the things the government are doing in such a way to give us a cleaner environment. Let me quickly take Timothy Shoronke's question. He's asking us, how can we keep our environment clean from the emission from energy?
That's a very germane question to this conversation we are having. Just as a matter of context, the in the world of greenhouse gas emission, we talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, et al. Now, scope 1 essentially relates to what you generate as part of your own normal business operations in greenhouse gas. Scope 2 speaks to what you have contracted out. But example of that is if you run a plant, a manufacturing plant, and then you subcontract power generation to another company, the greenhouse gas from that subcontractor or that contractor is going to be deemed as still part of what you are emitting. So that is scope 2. And then scope 3 is then what your own output, what kind of greenhouse gas is generated from your output, across the value chain. So if you produce oil, for example, what people do with the oil as they burn it is called scope 3. Now, why am I breaking this down? Globally, 9% of greenhouse gas emission comes from the oil and gas industry. And then in addition to the 9%, 33% of the global emission is coming out of the output of the oil and gas industry. Now, if you bring that home to Nigeria, 62% of greenhouse gas in Nigeria is generated from the energy sector. The closest to that is the agric and forestry sector, where you have 25%. And then you have, the industrial contribution as well. So the oil and gas industry generates significant amounts of this greenhouse gas, which are essentially CO2 and what we call the fugitive methane gas. So what can Nigeria do? There are upstream solutions, because if you look at the 60% in the 60 to 62% energy sector contribution to greenhouse gas in Nigeria, about a third of that relates to methane as a fugitive gas. So there are global recommendations of what can be done. So, for example, if you look at the global average, that 9% I spoke about what is the oil and gas thing, the 62% of that is generated in the upstream alone, and then in that upstream, the biggest part of that is methane gas. So, the possible solutions which Nigeria also will look into is, for example, how can we electrify the energy consumption at the wellhead, at the point of production, instead of using gas reinjection, for example? Can we connect those production platforms to the national grid, or can we use renewable energy for those production platforms? And we know there are companies who are already thinking in that light, that let's reduce what we're even using in the process of oil exploration and extraction. So there are solutions, but it is also sometimes a function of economics. If, for example, you look at people operating in deep offshore, how much do you think it's going to cost them to extend, grid electricity to their platform from onshore? It's going to be humongous. And so, that is not a solution that is feasible for now. And let's also say that whether or not we are transiting, the gas is going to still be around for a long time as transition fuel and as
mm,
sustainable fuel.
mm,
Even for oil, it will still take decades to get to what we call the peak oil. At which point, demand for oil will start to decline, and at which point, of course, the other renewable source of energy, because of technological advances, will have reduced in cost. So there is
mm.
choices that companies that make that countries like Nigeria can also make in a bid to actually curtail the greenhouse gas emission.
That is a brilliant submission by our guest. I've been guesting Mr. Lumide Esan, FCA, on this issue of energy in the energy transition and the role of gas in Nigeria. Fagbola is asking this question. He is asking, did the new energy transition of gas take into consideration the impact of gas flaring to sustainable economy-friendly environment?
Yes, so absolutely. If you look at Nigerian gas production as of now, which has been there about 7.5 billion scoff daily. If you look at how it is shared, about 40 to 45% of it is export gas, which is either exported through NLNG or exported through the West African gas pipeline to our neighboring countries. So that's about 40 to 45%. Then you have another, 30 or there percent thereabout, which is used as gas reinjection in the course of production itself. But you have 15% or thereabout, which is currently being flared. Now, there are two types of flaring. There is what we call routine flaring, which occurs when there is just no economic use for the gas.
For the
This may
gas, yeah.
be, for example, yes, you have a gas that is worth $100 million, but it will take you $200 million to build a facility. So it just is not economical, and so you
Flaring.
probably have to get a permit to flare it. And then you have the non-routine flaring, which are operational. For example, there may be emergencies and all of that. So what government has worked with industry over the years, and I think I mentioned that earlier, we're
Mm,
reducing gas fare in Nigeria. And there is an active World Bank project on this across a number of countries, including Nigeria, and actively supporting the government to bring down routine and non-routine gas flaring. Nigerian government also has legislations, and they've continued to review the legislations to ensure that only under very strict circumstances are gas flared in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, I know that for new projects, you won't even get approval for your field development plan if you do not have an associated gas solution for the
mm.
gas that will come from those wells.
Wonderful. And I'm sure Fagbola has picked some of the things he needed to know on his question. Like I said, this is an interactive section with our viewers. And I told you that they are versed and well connected globally. So the question keep pumping in because this is a new area where everybody seems to be delving into. And Ernest is asking this question that what is the social economic implication of Nigeria signing pact on not exploring or exploiting coal that we have in commercial quantity? But some European countries, e.g., Germany, are going back to coal system.
Thank you so much for the question, Omar Ernest. I think the answer is very simple. Um, we have more than abundant resources of gas in Nigeria. Gas is cleaner fuel than coal. So the question is, if we have abundant resources of gas and we've made significant investment, we've identified proven reserves, not just not the 203 TCF that we're talking about is not a 2P reserve, it's not a 3P reserve, is proven. So it's not a combination of proven and probable, which means we have significant gas resources to fire our country, to fire our economy. So we do not need coal. Coal is a pollutant. Germany does not have gas, so I can understand when this old dispute between Ukraine and Russia came in, and Nord Stream was disrupted. They had no choice but to fall back on coal. But we
Mm,
have abundant gas resources. If we didn't have enough, maybe we will consider coal as well, but we have more than enough. And I'd often say to people that for us, energy transition is twofold. One, it enables us as a nation to monetize our huge gas resources. Now, as we speak, we've had a number of visits from European friends. I'm talking about how we can, work on the, Abuja, Kaduna Kano pipeline, and connect it to Trans-Sahara, so that we can export gas to Europe via pipeline. When we do
Mm,
that, we would earn dollars.
mm,
We in the peak of COVID, the FID was taken in 2020 in respect of NLNG Train 7. That's a $10 billion project. And what that project will do is to raise capacity in NLNG from 22 metric tons to 30 metric tons. That's like, 35% increase. And
mm,
what is going to happen is those will translate into additional foreign exchange earnings
mm,
for the country. So, West African gas pipeline is there. We're exporting to our neighboring countries. So there's just so much we can do with gas. We're a country always struggling, for example, with price of petroleum products. But it's important to note that, do you know that compressed natural gas and auto gas, which is LPG, is even cheaper
mm.
than PMS? So it's a
PMS.
place where we'll be looking at also in the future. Say, do we, people would have option of not just having hybrid, they can have hybrid fossil car, which can run on PMS, can run on compressed natural gas as well. So we have the gas in abundance, and we are now, in fact, in a race against our Eastern African neighbors, those in the place where it's called the East African Rift, with significant gas deposits in Mozambique, where an LNG project is currently ongoing, and another one in Tanzania, where another one is being conceived. So there is huge need for gas around the
Mm.
world. Nigeria
That's
has gas in abundance.
that is
Currently,
it. Okay, let me quickly interject you there, Mr. So, I'm sure the last question by Ernest is confirmed that we have more than enough as regard the gas, so there is no need going to coal system. Before I come to Mr. Babashola, I consider that question germane and very technical. Let me quickly ask you, Mr. Esson, that given the enormosity and the richness of this natural gas reserve, uh, can you give the qualitative and quantitative contribution it will bring if effectively and efficiently introduced in the Nigeria energy mix? Before I come to Mr. Babashola's question.
okay, so first, progressively in the past decade, we have been utilizing a lot more gas in Nigeria. Um, of the 7.5 billion cubic feet we produce a day, um, already about 15% or 16% is used in the domestic gas sector. So, which basically confirms that we are using the gas. We are using the gas largely for power, but also to also for what we call the gas-based industries, which are like the fertilizer and petrochemicals and all of that. So, in the mix right now, what we've seen in the graph over the years is that increasingly we're having more of gas in the mix of our energy supply in this country. Now, rural Nigeria still very much use fossil, because if you look at Nigerian greenhouse gas emission, I said 60% in energy sector, and then you have the forestry, and then you have like 15% or thereabout that is coming from households, and this is from using kerosene stoves, using charcoal stoves, and all of that. So if you include rural Nigeria, you would see that it's still, of course, it's like 90% fossil. But if you want to then separate the fossils into different folds, as in gas away from oil, and that, and then you will see that gas is probably just under 20%, because largely we only use it to fire, the power plants, and also use it for the purpose of LPG for those who are using LPG. But the vast majority of Nigerians are still using kerosene. So in the
Hmm.
mix, kerosene is very significant, and also more significant is petrol, because
Hmm.
everywhere you go in Nigeria, people are throttling on cars around the country. So gas in the mix is still relatively small, but with huge potentials, because with people getting to know that, well, I even have options. I can use auto gas or CNG for my car instead of petrol, and it's cheaper, abundantly available in Nigeria. What we will then to see is that in the future, you probably see a lot more people wanting to use that option. Bear in mind, it only takes $600 for a conversion kit. Okay, with 600
Hmm.
$700, you can convert your car from petrol into compressed natural gas.
That is an eye opener. Just with $600 or $700, you are moving from the dirty energy to a greener and cleaner one. Let me pick on Mr. Olalere Babashala. He's asking that on pricing of upstream gas, do you favor the market prices, unaffordable, or first price, sub commercial? I'm sure this is a term used in the oil and gas sector, but we can all be beneficiary of it.
Okay, so let's step back and unpack this question. The reality is, I think all Nigerians have come to the conclusion that subsidy is not in anybody's favor. And that's why when the PIA was passed into law, Section 205 was very clear that petroleum products will be at unregulated market prices. And that is to ensure that people can actually come and invest money and know that they will earn a decent return on their investments. Now, the problem that is plaguing the gas industry is partly because of the subsidy at the electricity consumption level. Government puts a cap, and because the producers cannot really sell at the market price to NBET, because otherwise a lot of people might not be able to afford it. It's also stifling, investment in the sector. If you look at the PIA, the second schedule, sorry, the third schedule to the PIA addressed gas pricing for domestic consumption, and the fourth schedule to the PIA addressed gas pricing for gas-based industries. There is a genuine attempt at government to ensure that there is market pricing for gas, but at the same time wanting to ensure that a lot of our citizens are not sinking deeper into poverty. It is a tough one for the government, but I believe personally that wherever there's an issue of subsidy, I mean, rather than use 7 trillion of our budget to pay for fuel subsidy, and maybe use another 2 trillion to subsidize power, we can do gradual phasing out of subsidy. But while we are doing that at the same time, government must find a creative way to ensure that subsidy goes to the right places. Today, the UK released the autumn budget. You still see that even though they're increasing taxes, they're bringing down the band for the upper rate tax of 45%, they still find a place to protect the vulnerable. So the government must find other ways to protect the vulnerable in our country, and let's do away with subsidy because it's holding us all back as a nation.
That is a good submission. And to all our viewers, I have been guesting Mr. Olumide on FCA, and we've been doing justice to energy transition from our side. Mr. Eson, let me state here that on ICAN on Air, we have been following events as they unfold at the COP27 summit going on in Egypt. Basically, the issue has been around climate change as uh, anything to do with energy or gas being one source of such energies in question. Do you think that gas as a source of energy is a sustainable one?
Okay, so if we were having this conversation 2 years ago, I would be saying maybe not, but all the major powers, including the European Parliament, has accepted gas as sustainable energy, alongside with nuclear. The right activists, as you know, would always oppose anything that they consider is not natural. So even though this one is called natural gas as well. So but so generally under classification right now is accepted as sustainable. And I tell you why that is important. If it's not acceptable as a sustainable source of energy, it means that developers of oil and gas fields will struggle to access funds. And when they access funds, it will be extremely expensive because countries will start to penalize through the regulators, funding of fossil fuel. And some few years ago, BlackRock, the largest fund operator, was the first to announce that it wasn't going to fund oil and gas projects again. But the market taught BlackRock a lesson. They have retracted that position and they are funding oil and gas projects again. At the recently concluded Green Energy Africa in Cape Town and African Oil Week, I was there, and I was moderating a session that had World Bank and the big oil service companies on my panel. And one of the submissions was that even if you're going to transit from fossil to non-fossil, it requires a large-scale capital. The people who can afford these capitals are these same international oil companies. They are the ones who have power, and that is why you will see that the major acquisitions in the renewable energy space has been done by these companies, either buying some large solar, firm, or they're buying a wind firm, or they're the ones, taking stake in electric vehicle charging points. They are the ones with capital. So, we will need the world. We need to work with them to enable the world transit to a more sustainable form of energy. And in the future, we will talk more about hydrogen, whether it's green hydrogen or it's blue hydrogen. When in process of manufacturing of producing hydrogen, normally we use a lot of methane. There's a process that is called SMR. That methane is a huge contributor. But now there are technologies that are substituting the use of this methane, steam methane reformer, as is so called, with renewables. And that is why it's now being called green hydrogen. In other words, rather than use steam methane, we can use renewable to generate hydrogen. And hydrogen becomes a very good power source. Alternatively, blue hydrogen, in which case blue hydrogen, the difference is for blue hydrogen, you still use this steam methane reformer, but the greenhouse gas from it is captured and stored. So the future is looking more towards a lot more about hydrogen, a lot more about solar, a lot more about natural gas itself. So we can make natural gas safer. In short, that is what it means, and that is why I also accept personally that it should be a sustainable energy.
Sincerely speaking, you've been doing justice to this topic. And then let me take this question, and I'm sure it will address what Adeyemi Olani is saying this evening. And that is, as an objective and a non-biased Nigerian with vast experience in this field, do you think that the Nigerian energy policy is investor friendly? If yes, how? If no, why?
Okay, so thanks for that. The Nigerian energy policy, in my view, is a work in progress. The PIA, in my view, is a significant step forward in the right direction. Over the past 5 years, of the $60 billion investment that came into sub-Saharan Africa, oil and gas, less than 5% of that came to Nigeria, under $3 billion. The greatest undoing has been uncertainty. Investors do not like uncertainty. You can tell them you will pay 90% of your profit, but they want to know upfront so that when they model, remember these are all capital projects of 20, 30 years. So that when they model the economics, they can already know this is a positive NPV, this is a negative NPV. But when we had the PIB in the making for 20 years, investors were unable to commit their capital resources. So the problem is not with the policy itself, but that it took so long to eventually get the legislation to be. Now, the whole world is looking at how do we then implement this? Are we committed to implementing this? And unfortunately, the first, I would say, unfortunate event was that what was meant to be the simplest of all, which was the Section 205, which demands unregulated market pricing of petroleum products, was the first that we circumvented as a nation, because for good reasons, I would say, with the level of poverty in the land, you cannot just remove subsidy just like that overnight, because if you did that, you probably would have riots, big riots in your hand, because
Protest. Yeah.
our inflation basket is largely influenced by food cost, and the cost of food in itself is almost 30% transportation. So when the cost of transportation goes up, the cost of food prices goes up, and then entire inflation, becomes runaway. And so to avoid that, it's why this is being carried forward. But what I'm trying to say is that it is important that if we've passed a law, if we have a regulation, the government needs to see it through. And I think that is where I have concern, that government can do more, because it then provides the confidence and comfort that the investors want. I think our energy policy
Beautiful.
is balanced. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have to quickly interject because time is really not our friend. But as we wind up, let me quickly squeeze this question, and I think it will address the question that is coming from Samuel. Why does Nigeria have endless energy crisis, and what are some of the challenges facing the energy sector in Nigeria? Maybe in 1 2 minutes.
Okay, so why we have challenges with energy, it's largely because of the economics. So just to give you an example, 1 megawatt power of electricity requires capacity requires $1 million. So if you want to construct a 600 megawatts thermal plant, you need at least $600 million to do that, just to do 600 megawatts. It is capital intensive, and government is struggling with this capital, and it's only foreign investors that can actually help to bridge this gap. And for them to bridge this gap, they cannot bring such a huge money into an over-regulated market. So if government determines what the tariff is through the adjustment of the multi-year tariff orders on power, it's a value chain. So the discos are the ones eventually who sell the power. But if it's
Yeah.
controlled at that point, what filters down to the gencos, so generating companies, is limited. And these are huge investment that only foreign international companies can actually afford to make the investment. So that is the big struggle that we have as a country.
Big struggle that we have as a country, and I'm sure over time we'll definitely surmount to this if we have a consistent policy. Mr. Esson, sincerely, it's been a wonderful time. But in closing, I would like to pick this question that ICAN, your institute, my institute, is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of our members, accounting profession, and Nigerian business economy. What in your general advice and suggestion to our members and everybody on how effectively we can participate or contribute to this Nigeria energy transition discourse and the role of gas in Nigeria? Just a minute to discuss this.
Yeah, so let me start by saying that Nigerian government went to COP27 with the very minimum objective of attracting $10 billion for a start. These monies will be donor funded, some will be, commercial, multilaterals, and all of that. Um, Whoever is going to be making investment one way or another will require business plans.
Mm.
Okay. Um, no serious lender would fund a project for a company without having seen the company's audited financial statements. Yeah. The FRS will want to take its bite. You need tax advisors. So either way, you need members of our noble institute. Also, As part of energy transition, a very significant element of it is ESG reporting, environmental, social, and governance reporting. The different aspects of governments are picking this up increasingly, and in no distant future, this will become mandatory for most reporting. ICANN can already get ahead of the curve in helping to shape what this should look like in a Nigerian context, because ultimately we will be auditing for this. It provides opportunity for our members to earn some more decent fees, but at the same time, contribute towards a cleaner Nigeria, a safer, a healthier Nigeria in the journey of energy transition.
That is a brilliant way to bring our conversation to a close. And one thing I can assure you that our institute is indeed forward looking. Even on this platform on ICAN on Air, we've discussed extensively from different perspectives sustainability reporting from the regulator side, the practice side, so the ESG. I'm sure majority of the people who are ardent listener to ICAN on Air is benefiting on this, and a brilliant advice for our members to strategically position themselves, even for the greater opportunity that we have in this transition period. Sincerely speaking, I want to appreciate our guest for today, Mr. Olumide Esan, who has done justice to our topic on energy transition and the role of gas in Nigeria. Mr. Esan, thank you very much for sharing your evening with us on ICAN on Air. And I want to believe when next we need you to come and share more of your knowledge and expertise, you'll definitely avail us your time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We appreciate. So while I bring the program to our close, I quickly want to intimate us with some of the programs that the Institute is putting together, even as we proceed in the month. It will interest you that the Institute has put together a budget symposium with the theme Budget of Physical Consolidation and Transition, Realism or Mirage. This is coming up Friday, November 25th, 2022 at exactly 10 a.m. I'm sure majority of us would have seen the flyers going around. Click on it and register for the program. Our host for the day is our 58th president, Malam Tijani Musa Isa FCA. The chairman of occasion is our revered past president, Doyin Owolabi FCA. And our keynote speaker for the budget symposium is our erudite scholar, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, the partner at African Tax Legal Services, is the leader in PwC. And we've also had several panelists who will be doing justice during the budget symposium. I will advise you to look out for the link on your district society, on social media and the platform of the Institute. And also, let me encourage you that don't be the only person that will be enjoying this. Make sure you try as much as possible to invite someone to follow us on all our social media handle, both the Facebook, the YouTube, the Twitter account, the Instagram. Let them follow ICAN on Air to enrich themselves in some of the topical and contemporary issue that is going on. And on a final note, let us congratulate our new IFA president in person of Mrs. Asma Rosmoke of the Morocco. She has been elected as the IFA president. And also let's congratulate our own Malam Ismaila Zakari FCA, who has also been re-elected into the board member of IFA. We congratulate them and we pray that God Almighty will guide them to lead the affair of accounting profession worldwide. On this note, I want to wish you a splendid weekend. While I get hooked up to you next week Tuesday with another inciting topic and inciting guest, prepare and I'll hook up with you then. I remain your host, Olusegun Okwade FCA. Till next week Tuesday, stay cool and bye for now.